Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hi, we have in our leadership lounge today, Erika Petrelli Bayh is back with us. Yay, Erika, you're becoming a real regular around here.
I just love it. It's my favorite
It
lounge
really is
to go
quite
to.
Spectacular. I may have to change the name, the Leadership Lounge. I wonder if that exists already. Who knows? Anyway, we're going to talk today about one of Erika and my favorite topics, which is creating a culture of learning in the workplace. And this combines two of our kind of passions, which is learning and education, which is a lot of where our early careers were focused on and still are to a large degree. And then also kind of bringing those aspects to the workplace and creating engaged workplaces. And so it's the combination of those two things. And a lot of people ask me when they're not sure how to work with us, but they know their employees need something. They're like, why is this important? Why does work have to be a place where people learn? Can it just be that they go and work? Like, why do we have to do everything here at the office? And I'm like, well, you don't have to do anything. But what the result of what can happen from a really good learning culture is pretty remarkable. And we've seen it ourselves. And I specifically invited Erika because she started and helped create our program at our company. And then now we go in and we either slot into other people's experiences, and I'll share some of those that other companies are doing as well. But I was looking up some statistics for this because I'm like, I know from doing it with a lot of places, including our company, with the changes I've seen what's happened. But one of the things that came up when I looked up statistics was retention, right? And that really nowadays, especially, employees are looking for ways to keep growing in their careers and learning. And it's hard to grow in your career if you have to do all your learning separately, right? It used to be like, okay, I go to work and then at night I'm going to get my MBA or something. And instead, what this does for employees, it says, well, you don't have to leave to learn. You can learn here at work, and there may be some extra work. There's definitely some homework at night, and there's things that will be part of it, but we're going to learn together. And so we're creating an experience with each other as well as our own personal learning. And so you get kind of a double team building built-in aspect when you do it at the workplace. You also get more knowledge sharing. You also break down silos because you have people from different departments hopefully working together. So you get cross communication going. But I was reading one statistic, which seems really high to me. So you never know with statistics, right, where they're coming from. But it said like 94% of employees would stay at a company longer if it invested in their career development. And that learning is particularly important now because maybe 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have to learn new skills as quickly as you do now. But with technology the way that it is, with AI, you constantly have to be learning new skills, and also new skills in terms of emotional intelligence, because you have new generations coming into the workplace all the time, and new people, new ways of thinking and so forth, and you kind of have to shift. They also said that you could reduce turnover. This is coming from EduMe and the Institute of Data, and then a couple of online platforms, but it said about 40% of employees with poor training are likely to leave the company within their first year, right? And so really important in terms of how you set up things for people right away. And also talking about how people who are engaged are happier, people who are learning constantly are happier. And, the other piece of it that Erika and I know is that if it's boring learning, nobody wants more bad school in their life, right? Some people are happy to have left boring school. So that doesn't do any good. You have to make sure that it is engaging and makes learning what learning should be, which is engaging and fun and rigorous and challenging, but mostly something that people want to show up for, and that you're, kind of preaching to the choir,
Yeah. It's so funny. The comment that you just made about if it's boring, there's so much too that is important. I'm so glad we're having the conversation today, because much like when we talk about employee motivation and appreciating your employees, the same applies here. You can't just decide that, oh, we're going to offer this kind of training program and I can check that off the box. And why am I not suddenly seeing happier, more engaged employees? Because the point of this, creating a culture of learning, is really specifically and explicitly thinking about what do the employees on my team need to grow and be successful. So you can't just plunk in a generic training and call it done. So I think for the people that are like, well, I tried it and it didn't work, you probably didn't try it in a customized, individualized, intentional way. Possibly our conversation might open that up a little bit. And what did you try? And maybe rethink why that didn't work.
That's a good point. And maybe for folks, we should just define, since you brought it up, like, how would you define, Erica, a learning culture in a workplace setting? What is some definitions of that?
Well, I really loved what you said earlier. You don't have to leave to learn. I thought that was really powerful because of this notion of anything that's about my personal professional growth, maybe historically in an organization has been something I need to tend to on my own time. So what I do while I'm at work historically, and now this is obviously, it's not a blanket statement. So there's always exceptions to this, but I think by and large, it was you come to work and you do the tasks of your work. And if you want to evolve, grow, learn in any way, well, good luck to you once you clock out. So I think creating a culture of learning says we as an organization, me as your supervisor, we as our colleagues and coworkers are committed to growing and exploring new skills, new mindsets. You mentioned team building. We're committed to growing together. And as a supervisor, I might be committed to investing, whether it's money investment, time investment, words of encouragement investment. I'm investing in the fact that I want to see you grow and I want to make sure there's space during the workday to grow. So I think that's, one way to think about it.
Yeah,
for me.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think you're right in the sense that the leadership has to play an important role in fostering that, right? It can't just be something that comes from at one team. I mean, it can be. If you don't have the buy-in, I've seen this also, like places where they don't have the buy-in up above, but maybe they have a little bit, there's a manager out there that wants to do something with their team. Do it, right?
Yeah.
Do it. It doesn't have to.
Yes.
I mean, anything is better than nothing. But in the best possible world, and we have this with a few places where we've worked with long term, the leaders of the company are in those sessions also learning along with their employees.
Yeah.
And they're everybody's so lucky then to have that kind of knowledge share at the time. And you feel like you have, talk about like, you're kind of open and vulnerable to put yourself in that place, but also you're getting to share a lot of your knowledge and, learn from your employees and you see them in a different light and stuff. So that also can be exciting if you have and everyone, I know there's a lot of time is the biggest enemy of all of us in leadership. So it can be difficult.
Well, the thing about, the leader that's in the room that has committed their own time to saying, yes, I believe this important, what that does energetically for the team is so powerful. But just a reminder to so if we have any sort of disgruntled or skeptical listeners that are like, this is not going to affect the bottom line. This is a bunch of nonsense. Do your learning on your own time still, that mindset. If you want to talk about statistics that sound made up, if you want to look at how learning and development impacts a bottom line, you see numbers like organizations that really commit to ongoing, structured, intentional learning and development see overall $218 million across the board, like globally, of increased income, 24% more profitability on average for companies that invest in their employees in this way. And you mentioned that retention rate, of employees that stay versus employees that go. I read article after article that comments on that. And I think if you take like the conglomerate of averages, you're talking 60 to 70%. And it's not just our young ones. It's not just the millennials. It's all the way to the boomers. It's everyone that's still in the workplace will make some comment about the lack of or existence of training and support for me in the job is a significant factor and indicator in whether I decide to stay or
It's
go.
true. And if you look at how much money you spend on recruiting and training new employees, and you take just a portion of that for creating some really powerful, engaging learning programs at your work, I bet you're going to see the results because people are starting to do it. If you look at the recruiting numbers of big companies are down and their training, people are spending way more funding on creating really good leadership training, management training, and getting their folks up to speed and more knowledgeable in those areas and keeping them as a result.
Yeah. And keeping them, because that's the thing, it's easy to say, oh, nobody wants to work these days, or everyone wants to have their own personal life coach assigned to them at work, or, there's still those of us that are older, an older generation, there's a resistance because the truth is the tide is shifting. And so it's like, whatever we end up calling this age, there was the Industrial Revolution. What will this one be? It's an awakening, right? And that says the entire structure of work and how we think of work across industry is shifting. It doesn't mean that the current workforce is less motivated or unwilling to put in hard work. It means the current workforce is saying it's not enough to just show up to work and do the daily grind. Work should be a place of full fulfillment. And so let's all get on board with that. So that's not going away.
Yeah.
This is the era that we've arrived in. So we can get on board with it and look at how we can do it in our organizations, or we can watch our employees continually leave our organization.
And go to places where they have this, right?
Yes.
And even if your employees are skeptical about it, I've had that too. We work in a lot of places where they'll bring us in and the employees think that they're brought into this leadership development program that happens over a year. There's one place where we take a couple of cohorts and we work with them once a month for over a year, right? And a lot of people still think that they're chosen for that program because they're in trouble or they did something wrong or they need, remedial help in leadership. And it takes a little time to be like, no, this was actually a good thing. Like you were identified as having leadership skills or, it's like our immediate fear of like, oh no, what's wrong with me that I need to improve? And it's like, no, we're going to actually invest in you. We're going to invest in you as a future leader of this company. And once they get that, that's like an aha moment. That's like super powerful. And they're like, oh, then you see this bond towards their organization in a way that wasn't there before and towards their boss who nominated them or whoever. Now let's talk about how this started for us personally. So there's going to be people out there, those of you who are out there, if you're an HR person, this is something you think about all the time, probably. If you're a learning and development person, this is your job. So you could probably teach us many things in this process. I learn a lot from my L&D partners out there, but there's a lot of you who may be running organizations or running teams out there that kind of maybe need a little place to start. And so we're going to talk about just a little bit of our story as we kind of grew up in this, but we had gone, and Erika, you tell me if I'm going to hand this story over to you, but I'll start it off that years ago, we did an offsite for our team. We do one every year, no matter what. We do an offsite every year before the school year starts. We always do it in the end of summer where a lot of people do, and the beginning of the fall. And we did one that we called it the Big Idea Retreat or the Big Idea Offsite. And so we went to this camp and, we did lots of activity, but the main theme of it was that we would work in our department. So we divided everybody up. They went to different cabins or, different offices in the campsite that we were at. And they had a task to come up with one big idea innovation idea, something that could change the organization positively, like it could bring in revenue or it could fundamentally change who we were as a company to be better for our employees, whatever it was, or it could save us money. It could be a big saving program. It could save time, energy, whatever, any of those things that would kind of innovate how we were doing things. So it was very wide open. The way we structured it, they had different prompts and different things that would take them through this process. And by the way, that's just like a whole separate podcast because that's a very interesting, the stuff that came up and, what happened and the kind of investment that people had in their ideas working for the company was pretty powerful. But anyway, Erika's team came up with this learning idea. And so I'm going to hand this baton over to you of this story because the first time I heard about it was when she and her team came in and on the last day of the retreat, we did presentations of their ideas. And so why don't you take over, Erika, what your process was?
So we're talking about the leadership classroom, which it's funny because when it's been so many years, right? And we've learned so much over the years, just how important having that culture of learning. I think so much of what you and I have discovered organically is this idea of the power of team building and creating a culture of learning where people feel supported in a lot of different ways, not just here's your to-do list, that those things actually equal revenue. So like you said in the beginning, just to preamble a little, you talked about this idea of there's a lot of ways to look at big ideas. And some of it is directly, how are we going for different streams of revenue or directly looking at revenue? And this is a more indirect way. So that is important to keep saying when we talk about culture of learning, that again, for the skeptics to keep saying this leads to revenue, this leads to the bottom line, because what you're doing is creating a culture where people are better at their jobs. So it does directly lead to revenue. Anyway, so the leadership classroom idea was really just this idea of why can't our organization be a place where people love to come, not just to do their work, but also to gain new skills, whether they're new skills that are directly related to their job right now, or possibly new skills that are related to a job they imagine for themselves in the future. So stretch topics, and then sprinkled in with some fun. So topics that are specifically nothing to do with work and everything to do with personal growth and development, the kind of classes that you might historically take outside of work. So the idea was, by creating this leadership classroom, we would weekly offer small amounts of time. So we're not talking about taking employees away from their job for hours, another thing that leaders in organizations would worry about. Not just that we don't have time to train, but what does that time in training do for taking people away from their work, right? So a half an hour here, an hour there, our employees could select workshops to take in this leadership classroom menu. So it's a menu of options, almost like you're taking college courses. This is what I'm going to take this week. This is what I'm going to take this month. Completely optional, but really designed to create an environment where we said very overtly, we care about your growth and we're not going to dictate the path. We're going to offer options, and then you get to, speaking to that thing of like, you can't just say everyone gets to do Excel spreadsheets 101. Aren't we excited, all of you? You know, have Excel 101 next to how to have difficult conversations. You know, have a variety of topics so that people really select their path. So that's the basic of that big idea, which really planted a seed that flourished for years, you know?
Yeah. And, at first I was listening to it. I remember you just reminded me of that resistance of like, oh my God, this is so much time. Like when I saw your calendar, I think you guys had put up like a calendar of like potential ideas, and there's something every day for employees to do. And in my mind, I was like, something to do besides work.
Nobody's ever going to work again.
I'm like, Erica. But when I
take it down.
And I just am like, don't respond. But the good thing is that I kept my mouth shut. And when I looked at it closer, we could say, okay, this is a half an hour at lunchtime. This is another day at lunchtime. This is, at 4 o'clock, or this is at the 3 o'clock when they go for coffee anyway at the water cooler. Yeah. This is, a 15-minute meditation or whatever those things were that were happening. And it was a trial and, trial and error, so we would really adjust, where do we go from here? And, that thing evolved. That leadership classroom was so popular. People loved it, right? And it was such an aha moment for me, because here we were with our biggest clients at the time being in education. And here we weren't even offering ongoing education for our employees. We were always training our employees. We were always training in leadership as part of, your job. We would offer training regularly, but we never had any of these kinds of more casual and mixed with some more formal training programs. And so Erika put out a calendar, every month of like, here are the opportunities. And then she kind of watched what was more popular than others. And we dropped things that weren't, and we did more of things that were popular, and some. And then that kind of evolved, right? I mean,
it definitely evolved. It took a lot of different life forms over the years. One thing, as you were talking, I wanted to also add is something that was really powerful in the beginning too, was that unlike the sort of formal training that you mentioned that we would of course do to prepare our staff members for the specifics of their job, which is I think where a lot of people start and stop. Here are the very specific skills you need to do your job. This expanded and really was about personal and professional growth, and any one of us could facilitate a topic. So if Tom in IT was the expert on Excel spreadsheets, Tom in IT is going to lead that session. You know what I mean? And so that there was that team building opportunity to suddenly see your colleagues as experts. So it wasn't just always your boss or the boss leading the training, but that you're looking at your colleagues who are sharing skills that maybe you knew they had, and they just are sharing with you in a way that elevates, kind of like, wow, look at what I just learned from this person. Or maybe you didn't even realize they had the skill and suddenly you're learning from them. So in addition to the power of learning from peers and that surprise, there were things that, because to your point, we allowed the sort of 4 o'clock on a Friday or lunchtime half hour, we could a little bit more even indulge in. I remember in particular there was 2 or 3 people that just casually were talking about their desire to learn to speak Spanish. And we had a fluent Spanish teacher that then he was willing to, during lunchtime, sit with them and teach some Spanish. And that happened organically. And then we quickly added that to the classroom calendar. So others that might want to have that skill. So that was informal, a sharing of joy. And so those kind of opportunities, I think because we had created a formal calendar and said, you weren't saying, hey, here's the calendar, but I'm going to judge you and look critically if you do it, because I'm sure there are organizations that they might put some learning and development opportunities in place, but if it's not supported by the higher up, people are not going to feel safe or comfortable to participate, because they're going to worry if they're judged in that way. But you and all of the sort of powers that be, it was a collective agreement that we were in support of this process.
Yeah. And I think, how that then evolved was we started to look at like, that was having a very wide impact, right? Very small amounts across the organization. But then what we started to go was, how can we go deeper with some? And so then we created what we still call LIA, or Leadership in Action, which was a group of folks who put their name in the hat and said, I want to do this. They had to get 2 recommendations from people that they've worked with or their colleagues, which sent everybody into a kerfluffle at our organization. But it was so fascinating to watch that, because when employees have to do that themselves, it's really telling. Like when you say, do you want this deeper learning experience on how to be a better leader and to take your leadership to the next level? And what you have to do is you have to put in an application, you have to answer some questions, and you have to get 2 referral letters. Like you immediately start to see who's really willing and wants this, right? And who's going to put in the effort. So we even, for companies that bring us in to do these programs now, we even sometimes say, hey, do you think you're ready to put it out there to some employees like this? And some of them are like, no way. But then some are like, well, that would be interesting to see who you get, Others just say, no, we're going to pick them, in that process. All of it's good, but we had done it this way because it was just so different and interesting. And then we took them through what we thought at the time was going to be a 1-year process, which was once a month we would meet as a cohort for a few hours and kind of dig deeply into their leadership journey. And Erika and I co-facilitated that. And then, so that was powerful because I was running the company and Erika was a vice president of the company. So you immediately have leadership buy-in, but you don't have to do that. We were facilitators. So that was something that was natural and that we loved. You can easily bring in folks to do that. But anyway, we had done that. And then we decided like nobody wanted to leave after 1 year. Remember, we thought we'd go on to a new cohort and everyone's like, no, don't leave us. And so we decided to start a new cohort of the people who weren't sure, but heard such good things. And so we moved the second group up to be, second years or sophomores. And we all of a sudden, no one ever wanted to leave. And so we had this like a college basically within our organization and had a graduation ceremony after 4 years, and what we found, which was very telling for me, is at one point I started to look at this is about 10 years ago or so, maybe even longer, maybe 15 years ago, I looked at the people who were leaving the organization, right? And I noticed the people who were leaving the organization were people that were not involved in LIA at all.
Yeah.
And I started to go, wow, that's very interesting. It doesn't mean that people who were in LIA some of them left, of course, over time, but they stayed a lot longer. And it was almost very telling. If you didn't sign up, if you didn't do Leadership in Action, you were probably not as engaged as everybody else. And I remember talking to a few people in their employee reviews and saying, hey, listen, I think your next step is to sign up for this program, because let me tell you, people who do it stay longer, their careers grow. And we started to look at who was growing in their careers, and it was directly correlated to that. Not for everybody, but for most people, right?
Yeah.
If you were already at a certain point and you didn't do it, that's different. But if you were a young person, middle manager, new manager, seriously important in that process. And believe me, my senior managers wanted to know what the people working for them were learning, because there's nothing worse than everybody else learning how to be a good leader. And you're going, am I doing everything wrong? Am I doing everything wrong?
Yeah. Can you give me the Cliff Notes version of
that? Oh God, what am I supposed to be doing? What are they saying about me? Anyway, so that was a little bit about our journey. And we still have a Leadership in Action 1-year program that happens in our organization. But there's lots of ways that other organizations do this that we work with that can be really valuable. It just depends on where you are in your process. Yeah, Tatiana's here.
Oh, no, I just really wanted to speak to my experience in the Leadership LIA and my group, right? In the group, we learned how to actually talk and give constructive feedback to each other as part of the process of one of the activities. What happened is that group of people, as we started to form this group, we started to meet separately after LIA. And so like those of us that stayed, we're cross-departmental. We have these what we called quad meetings because there were 4 of us. And so we have at the time, we just had influence in our departments, and then we would get together and kind of support each other with bigger initiatives. And now some of us are part of the executive team, and that really impacts how we interact with each other because we've learned those skills in that setting before we actually had to have disagreements that really affect the bottom line and all those kind of things.
Yeah, talk about accountability, right? And that piece of like, how do you get a team that's functional and having that trust, which you guys built up, a strong trust, and seeing how you can hold each other accountable for things is really powerful to an organization and to someone personally.
Well, and that's exactly what I was about to say. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out which applies and how do you apply it for your organization, there's 2 different kinds of styles of learning environments that we've described. The leadership classroom, which is sort of these one-off, smaller, optional, come once, come always, come never, come at 4, come at noon. It's really just a wide open menu that creates a mood, right? And then the leadership in action is a dedicated cohort that is committing to a series of workshops that is a deep dive into professional growth specifically. And we do that for organizations as well. Maybe not the application process, to your point, but still there is a level of commitment that says, for the next year, we're going to meet with your group once a month or twice a month, and we're going to steadily scaffold these skills and build them together. So that in and of itself, for the learning part of it, is phenomenal, because you're really committing to being a partner in learning for these team members. For the culture part of it, what happens is what always happens when you're a part of a group, when you're a part of a cohort, is what Tatiana just described. So over the years, we know, Christine, which groups, they kind of move as a pack now, right? Which groups were in this class together.
They're close.
Because they are, and there is a bonding that happens. And because so often those groups are cross-departmental, you get a value added that we couldn't have predicted or scripted.
Yeah.
But it's just that we're having this experience together, and therefore we have each other's back. We're supporting each other in a way that is not going to happen, or wouldn't have happened if we didn't have this collective experience.
Yeah.
So that's a really powerful benefit that's maybe harder to articulate.
Yeah, and ours is a small company, but I've seen that happen even in a lot of the big companies we work with. Some of the big companies, right? Some of the biggest in the world, I've seen it happen where you start to get some relationships with people outside of your divisions. And that is really powerful to feeling like you're an important part of a big organization. It makes it a little bit smaller, right? When you're struggling or you need to learn something from somebody in legal or whatever, you have someone now from your cohort that you can call up and be like, hey, can we grab us some coffee? And you have an in there where you just don't feel like, oh, I don't know anybody in this big place,
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on what you feel like your folks need. And I'm just going to put this out there for those of you who, if you're an HR professional or you're a learning and development person, if you need any help in going like, what would be great for my place, you can reach us you can look in the liner notes and you can reach out, and Erika or I would be happy to give you a half an hour call to talk through your place and what might be some good ideas for things for you to do. So if you're an HR professional out there who's trying to figure this out, or if you're just the person who's been given the HR responsibilities in your office, or the person who's responsible for this, or you're even a manager out there of a team that wants to do this, we're happy to help in that way. Just look that up in the liner notes, because I know for myself, I wouldn't have been able to do this at the time if Erika and her team hadn't kind of come up with it and brought it to me, and then I could help kind of discern it a little bit more. I also want to just say that it's really important to look at the type of learning that would be good for your folks. If you have a completely remote workforce, do you now we used to call them offsites, right? We still do places where people are working together, and then we go offsite somewhere to get a fresh new look. Well, I know a lot of all remote companies, especially startups, and they do now what I'm kind of terming an on-site, because they never are together. So all of a sudden they come together for what's a typical offsite, but it's the first time that they're actually physically in the room together. And that can be an interesting experience too. If you're not used to actually even just seeing each other live, that can be very powerful. You can also do remote learning, right? Remote learning skyrocketed during COVID, and certainly we do tons more of it. It can be powerful. People are a little drained on it if it's the only thing you do, but if it's all you can do that at least, and do it in a way that's engaging. Like, it can still be interactive. It can still be fun. It can still be energizing. It can still get people, working together, seeing each other instead of just, listening to a recording alone with your headphones on, in the dark by yourself with your screen off. That's one thing. And for some learning that may help, but for generally, I like to get this too for experience that Erika talked about, where you're getting learning, but you're also getting a team experience or a kind of experience of knowing each other at the same time, building that trust that Tatiana mentioned, really key. And you'll see more accountability and people holding each other more accountable if that trust is built.
The other thing that, again, for the people that are listening and still trying to translate what we're suggesting to their specific work situation and still struggling to see that there's so many, what you and I and our team have really consistently done over the years is look for opportunities to create those moments. And so we have, for our staff meetings, not our individual department meetings, but for our full company meetings, which Christine has probably mentioned before, that we call popcorn because the ideas are popping, that these in the beginning of our early days together were classic staff meetings. We reported on our things that we needed to report on, and then we all went our separate ways. But fairly early on, we realized that we were missing an opportunity for learning. And so to those listening, if you even think about your current staff meeting structure, and if your current staff meeting structure is just a reporting out and then a heading out, maybe you even build in a few minutes for learning at the staff meeting where you're presenting a topic each time that is all about professional or personal growth. And it doesn't have to be you, the person leading the staff meeting, leading that section. But so that can be expanding your meeting by 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be huge, but it will make a difference in people's joy to coming to your staff meetings potentially, you know?
Yeah,
so there's
absolutely.
pockets. Is look for the pockets, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And we have a whole episode on this on impactful meetings, and that is episode 17 in case you want to check it out. But that's a great tip. And Erika just jumped us into some tangible tips. So let's keep going with that flow. So that's definitely a great first tip that Erika just gave us. So let's keep going with that flow and talk about some other tips to doing really impactful learning opportunities at work and creating this kind of culture of learning. So the other thing is to make learning an experience, not just a bad classroom experience, right? Make it something that is fun. It has a little bit, if you can, of theater, has a nice space to live, put maybe some food, can be light, something there that makes it something special. So that think about the room that you're putting them in. Does it have crud everywhere? Does it have boxes up to does this look like a nice space for these folks to come? Think about how you're creating that experience, how you're creating that room, how you're making this feel special to those folks. So that's another tip that I have. What's another tip that you can think of that's good for this?
Well, this is less of a tangible tip in terms of do this. It's more of a beware of this.
Okay,
because
those are good too.
Because a lot of times what we hear is fear in leaders. Like, I don't want to invest all this time in an employee if they're just going to leave anyway, or if I train them out of the organization. But what we continue to say is train them and they'll want to stay. So I just want to remind us that the employees that leave are oftentimes the one on their way out that say it's because they didn't invest in my growth. So this is my cautionary tale for those that are holding back because of fear that you're just going to invest all this time in somebody that's not going to stay anyway. When you invest in time, they're much more likely to stay. So we've said that already. I just want to emphasize it now because it's really important. It's the opposite of what a lot of our brains kind of default to.
Yes. And if you can sit in on some of those sessions, what's fascinating is you see people, you really see them. You see all the good. You see if there's a problem with an employee, you see that too. Yeah. And it can sometimes really clarify it's time for this person to go. Because in a classroom experience, our best and worst selves can come out. Yeah.
Yes.
And I know I've seen some people in those where I'm like, wow, okay. I never saw those people because they're out doing their job, but now watching them relate to other people in the moment, I can see that they're horrible to work with, and so it gives me that's not the reason to do this, but that's certainly something that did.
So you can be a spy.
Can happen. Because it's a different way of working with folks. But most of the time you see the best parts of themselves, right, come out, and you see things like, oh, maybe I need to move this person into a job where they get to do more of this thing that they're great at. It just gives you another slice of who this person is and to get the most of them, which is what we want to do as leaders, right? We want to create an organization where we're getting the most out of people and likewise they're getting the most out of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's another?
So another sort of cautionary tale and do this is to ask what they want, because again, a mistake that we make is, well, here's the training that I have decided is best for you. And you may be right, but you may not be right. And so it's a great show of respect, whether you do a survey, depending on the size of your organization. You send out a survey, you do some informal polling, you ask them at the water cooler, however asking looks for your organization, to really start to ask, what skills do you think would help you be more effective in your job? What skills would you be really interested in learning for a future job? How would this workplace be more beneficial to your personal growth? Asking those questions before you like I did in the beginning is, here's your schedule.
Yeah.
Choose what you want. Solicit their feedback first, because then you're starting off by showing that you've listened and you've heard and you actually care about their growth. So you're starting off strong before you even offer a thing.
Yes. And in the liner notes, there's also, if you want to do this and you're not sure how to start, there's a real quick link to some survey questions that you can ask, real easy survey questions that you can just plop into SurveyMonkey or, some sort of Data Question Pro or whatever you have at your office that you use. That's a great idea, Erica. And even when we go into organizations, we ask either the HR person or the CEO, can you do this pre-survey with folks? Here's one that you can use that's already done, so that we already have buy-in. It also excites them to know like something's coming and I'm being asked my opinion. Immediately opens people's minds up to being open to the experience more, right?
Yes.
Cuts down on that fear. The other tip related to that is to be sure that you're doing regular feedback surveys throughout the process and afterwards. So you can see, because people don't always tell you to your face how things are going, especially when you go up and go, how's it go? Did you like it? And you're so full of want for this to be good.
Wasn't that good?
You're like, yeah. And then you think everyone's loves it, but there's nothing like an anonymous survey to really get their experiences. And, I encourage in those anonymous surveys to also ask questions like, what was the biggest thing you learned in this process? Because you'll also see what starts to come out as major learning for them. And it puts the onus on them to not just comment on everybody else, but to go, wait, what was my intention? What part do I have to play in this? So those feedback surveys, and they're easy to do, like I said, afterwards or going through the process. If you're doing a monthly session, don't wait till the end, because you want to get better as you go and you want to tell people that. So maybe you do one after the first one for sure. And then maybe you wait a couple so they just don't get survey fatigue. You wait a couple more and you give them another one. And each time as the facilitator, you come in and say, listen, I read your survey results. So first of all, now they're going, oh, okay, she reads those. I need to actually do them, because the hardest thing is getting people to actually take the 5 to 7 minutes to do the feedback survey. So you say, I read them. This is what I'm adapting based on your feedback. Or you guys said you wanted more of this, so I'm adding this to our agenda. I'm going to...
Yes.
And then that it's not enough. You and I learned this early on, Erica. It's not enough just to make the changes and get better. You have to tell them.
You have to communicate.
You have to tell them, I learned this from you, and therefore I am making this change. And then they go, oh, she's changing. Before that, Erica and I would change stuff based on their feedback, but not say it. And people never thought we changed anything. And we'd be like, we did it, but we didn't tell them that we did it. It's simple, but it's a really powerful brain trick.
Well, and psychologically speaking as well, the more, and we've learned this too, the more we communicate, we heard this, we got these suggestions, here are the changes we made, or here are the choices we made, which are never going to include everyone's thoughts and suggestions, because that's impossible. Because there's always going to be enough disparate ideas that you can't do all the things. But so if I've offered a suggestion and you don't take it, but you've explained what you are going to do and why, I'm less likely to be sort of disgruntled or hold a grudge that you didn't choose my idea, because I understand the greater vision or why, versus if you're not communicating, I'm like, well, they clearly hate me. This is clearly a conspiracy against me. We tell these stories in our head.
Yeah, that's true.
Another tip. So we've, larger organizations maybe have a budget. So each employee gets, here's $800, here's $1,500, go do your professional development. And if you are in an organization that you have that opportunity, that's phenomenal. And if you're committed to creating a culture of learning, the second part of that is, here's your budget, go get your learning, do whatever you want, but then come back and teach us about it. Come back and teach us what you learned. So that second part I think is skipped a lot, because you say, oh, I have the budget, I gave it to them, look at me doing a great job creating a culture of learning. No, you're doing a great job supplying your employees with money to tend to their growth, but that doesn't necessarily impact your culture at all if it's all happening outside.
Right.
Come back and tell us what you learned. Come back and take 5 minutes at the start of the next staff meeting and teach us one thing that you learned. However you want to do that, really cement that into your culture by having them bring it back, because then you're really celebrating whatever they choose to do, which is, again, it makes them want to keep coming back.
Yeah, and we have some programs where people will come to us from different organizations in that way with money that their companies have spent. And one of the things that we've added in, just based on exactly what you said, is how are you, the last couple classes are really talking about how are you going to bring this back to your organization? Because one, it's helpful for the organization that put that money in there, but two, it's helpful to you in your career to give you a way to highlight some of the things that you're learning and doing, right? It's creating a leader within that organization. The other thing to think about is, like, if your organization doesn't offer these things, what agency do you have? Because some people will say, well, I'll go somewhere else and find that. But sometimes that's the harder track, and maybe there's a way to be an advocate within your own organization to make the change happen. And like I said, in our organization, it did not exist. and Erika and her team brought it in and really created a whole new job for yourself, right? I mean, you really then became in charge of this kind of learning and development at our organization. Before she had a very different job. So think about, not that you have to have this job forever, but you may be able to advocate for it. And a lot of young people are doing that. We're getting more and more HR people that are coming to us and saying people are insisting or really requesting to have these types of programs. The other thing, and I'll just leave this as the last tip of the day for time, to think about who's facilitating the learning. If you have a bad boss, the last thing you want to do is go to a learning session with that bad boss, right? And so sometimes as in leadership, we don't know, like, how are these people that are facilitating? And so you really need to either one, know that they're a great facilitator and see what's happening right ahead of time, or you can bring in outside organizations, get feedback, watch what they're doing, ask them for samples. We've done that at organizations where we've gone in and done, kind of auditions and tried out, things, showed them what we do. But make sure that you're not just making your employees sit through terrible facilitators, right? Because then that will backfire on you. And that's sometimes hard to know. And so therefore people are just like, just take the money and run, do it yourself. But you're missing out on this other opportunity potentially to have this other experience in the place. And so anyway, like I said, my offer stands. If you want Erika or myself or one of our team just to listen to your ideas on how to help you create this in your workplace, we're happy to do it free of charge. So you'll get that information in the liner notes. Also, if you're a person who doesn't even work at a company and you want to have more of a culture of learning in your household or for yourself personally, I'm just going to throw that to Erika because I know there are some people that listen. There may be my good friends out there, thank you, that are always trying to apply this not to their businesses, but to themselves. And think about, how do you create this ongoing culture of learning for yourself at whatever age you are? Do you have any suggestions for them?
I do.
Erika?
I do. Whether you're, no matter what age you are, whether you're working for a Fortune 500 company, or you're working as an amazing stay-at-home parent, or whatever your life looks like, schedule time in. Make a meeting with yourself for learning. So in the example you just gave, if sort of it's like, it's just me, I'm not really connected to an organization, but I'm committed to my own growth. Well, make a meeting with yourself every day. Even if it's just 30 minutes, maybe you go on a walk and you're listening to a podcast like this one. Maybe you're starting your morning reading a book. But if you don't schedule it in, you'll find 100 reasons every day not to do it. So that's why I say make it a meeting with yourself is probably the quickest way to offer a tip to that demographic, which is, it's important. So schedule it as a meeting.
Yeah, I love it. And keep thinking of things that you want to learn, whether it's the guitar or Spanish or whatever, how to crochet, whatever it is that could be fun to listen better, whatever it is.
As Benjamin Franklin said, Christine.
Oh, well, look at you with your quote. All right.
An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest.
All right.
So I think we can just leave it right there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Erika, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for really kickstarting our own culture of learning at the Leadership Program. It has been incredibly impactful for us all personally, but also for our organization as a whole. So thank you for that. And good luck to all of you guys out there who are trying to increase your own workplace cultures and your own lives in continuous learning. Tatiana just put in the chat that if you want any of the information from any of these episodes, you can go to tlpnyc.com/podcast to see all the resources from the different episodes. And we got a lot of episodes starting right now in our vault. So please check it out. And we look forward to hearing back from you, any of your feedback and ideas on future episodes. All right. Take care. Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.